So our next speaker is online. It's Piero, and I hope you can hear me. It's very early in the morning for you, so I hope you're not too sleepy.
No, it's fine. Thank you very much. Hi.
So Piero was at the PSI and is currently at Microsoft Quantum. He's by training a computational scientist, but from the background of material sciences and engineering. And I hope we got that right. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. Can you see my screen?
Not yet at the moment. No, we can see you.
Can you see it?
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay.
And he's just presenting to us how we can actually move our software into being used with GPUs and TPUs. Does that sound about right? So how we can make it faster.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. So today I will speak about how to integrate machine learning frameworks in general into scientific workflows. And my talk is divided in two parts: experiments and simulations. The first part will be fully speaking about experiments, especially in structural biology. Actually, the disclaimer is that I'm also not a structural biologist, so I'm mainly a material scientist as background. So pardon me if I say something which is not proper, but I will dive into it now. So the idea behind this is that all this project that I will describe to you started as something called the RedML project at Paul Scherrer Institute, which was a collaboration between Paul Scherrer Institute, the Swiss Data Science Center, and the Swiss supercomputer. And the idea is really to speed up the processing of serial crystallography data and experiments, and also try to apply data reductions thanks to machine learning techniques. So the main people behind the project actually were Alon Ashton and Philippe Leonarski, while from the point of view of the Swiss Data Science Center, the main people like helping us were Benjamin Bejar and Luis Barba. You can find more information at this link, which is where the Data Science Center shows all the different projects that they actually do in collaboration with experimental facilities. And the main idea behind everything is that detectors are improving pretty quickly. And now we have very large detectors that can actually acquire data at a very high frame rate. In particular, when I joined, the Jungfrau detector was being released, and the Jungfrau detector can operate at 2 kilohertz. So the idea is really to try to have a data processing pipeline that can match actually the speed, which is not a trivial task actually. So the whole framework in which we want to work is like a setup like serial crystallography, where we can have very high frame rate and where a lot of the data that you measure is actually noise, and just a part of it is the data that you want to keep and store and make redundant and like take home for offline processing. And another thing that we would like to achieve with this software is that we would like a fast feedback engine that actually help you steering experiment while they are actually running. So let's say that you understand if you are actually measuring something that is indexable or not, and if you can stop the experiment in real time. And in general, also we want software which is easy to develop, prototype, and transfer it to different libraries. So the idea behind a large part of my talk is that we are trying also to develop software which is mainly written in Python and can be serialized and ported into other lower level languages, such like C++. And we make heavy use of deep learning frameworks like PyTorch, because they really allow to write simple code in a few lines of code, and actually deploy it into different accelerator, which are those typically supported by deep learning frameworks such as GPUs, TPUs, and CPUs. So just to refresh, what is the typical setup for an experiment? So you have a bin that contain protein crystals, then you have the diffraction experiment happening, and you collect a series of images. They are actually independent samples in serial crystallography. And what we want to do is that given an image, we need to find where are the spots, and then we need to solve the indexing problem. So the thing is that if we are able to solve the indexing problem, we can know if we actually have information inside the data sets, and we can get rid of the noise, and also we can discard those images that are not actually containing information, usually actually to resolve the structure of the protein. And another thing that is typical in this kind of analysis setup is that there are a huge stack of software that is used by the scientist, and there are a lot of hyperparameters that are tuned. Machine learning can actually help automate this process and make the whole process end-to-end less sensible to hyperparameter tuning by a scientist. So the idea behind everything is published into this paper, which is called the Toro indexer. Basically, it's a new indexing algorithm that is fully written in PyTorch. And it's actually a very small code because, as I said, writing in PyTorch really allows to prototype pretty quickly. So the whole code is actually 500 lines of codes, less than 500 lines of codes. And actually, you can write it in Python, and then you can use libtorch to serialize it into a code that can be into a module that can actually be imported into C++ code. In fact, you can use actually this indexer as a standalone Python code or as a module inside Xcandle for Crystfile. Sorry, not Xcandle, inside Crystfile. So the idea is that you can try this very fast implementation within 500 of lines, and you will see that you can still have fast performances and actually use it as a real-time feedback system. But there is also a way to make it even faster, which is writing it in CUDA, which is much more demanding from the point of view of the software development task, but it can achieve really much higher performances. So I will not speak about this because the whole talk is mainly about how we can use actually deep learning frameworks to simplify the typical job that the scientist has to do. So I will mainly speak about this Python implementation, which is maintained and developed mainly by Luis Barba. And so the algorithm behind the indexer is pretty similar to Xcandle. There are a few steps that are different, especially in the way in which the solution are ranked and trimmed. So here is the actual part in which machine learning is the actual machine learning part of the algorithm, because we employ robust optimization to quickly find the solution to the indexing algorithm. You will find more detail actually in the paper. What is important is that we can exploit the robust optimization framework, which is coming with PyTorch, which is highly parallelized, and it can actually be ported between CPUs, GPUs, and TPUs. So this indexer actually can run in GPUs and can achieve very high performances. I will now try to convince you that the indexer actually work and can be very fast. So to do this, we analyze different protein data sets that are deposited in the CXIDB. And you can see that Toro performs pretty, the results of Toro are equivalent to the results of his Gandalf and are actually outperforming most FLM. We tried running Toro into different setups actually to understand how sensible it was to the different parameters of the analysis of the experiments, and also to understand how well it would perform in a typical setup of analysis after an experiment. And basically, the indexing rate is similar, but also the quality of indexing is very similar to X-Gandalf. So those are the typical metrics that usually you check after an experiment, after solving the indexing problem. And you can see that again, Toro and X-Gandalf, they perform pretty similarly, and they outperform most FLM. But what is really important here is that thanks to PyTorch, we can actually achieve a huge speed up. So basically, when we run Toro inside the Crystal suite, we can have a speed up of 8 times on CPUs. And when we run it on GPU, we actually have a speed up of 100 times and even 1,000 times. So here I'm introducing a different label, which is called Toro RT. RT stands for real times. So Toro is an algorithm, so we can tune a few parameters. So if we make it a bit less accurate, we can make it much faster. And actually, with this version, we can actually process images. We can process 3,000 images per second. So we can actually make it a good candidate for real-time processing. And here's some other performance metrics, which shows that actually with Toro real time maintain very high performances also for images that contains a large number of spots, and the quality of the indexing is not degrading compared to Gandalf. So I hope I'm convincing you that you can actually achieve good accuracy and real time processing. And you can process in real time using something as simple as 500 lines of codes using these deep learning software libraries. And another advantage is that if you're fast and if you run on GPUs, you save a lot of energies actually. So this is just a sketch of the energy consumptions of the different implementation of the algorithms running on different outer accelerators. And you can really see that if you really use the fastest implementations on a very cheap hardware, you also really have a very low energy consumption, which for a large scale facilities is also important, I suppose. Another thing is that once you can solve very quickly the indexing problem, you can really bring it back on the image. Since you know the lattice, you can really project it back on the diffraction images, and then you can discard whatever is not a possible solution to the indexing problems. So you can actually discard a large portion of the image and save just a fraction of it. Another trivial way then to do data reduction is also to discard all the frames that are not indexable. And in this way, actually, we are able to compress by a lot the amount of data that we need to store after an experiment. And the last part about the experiment is we can also use machine learning to improve spot detection. Now so all the results that I introduced till now, we're using peak finder rate, which is a deterministic algorithm, but actually you can also train a simple convolutional neural network for the classification of problems, or actually an algorithm like UNet for doing segmentations. And you can train UNet to actually segment the image and find the actual mask that correspond to the spots of an image. I will not go into detail explaining what is UNet, but it's just a very simple architecture that was introduced for segmenting bioimages, and is working actually really well also for spot finding. UNet is easy to train and is also easy to fine tune to different data set. And luckily in this setup, we have a huge amount of data. So it's with the very small portion of data from each experiment, you can actually refine and make this spot finder very accurate for every system that you're working on. And what we are seeing is that this ML spot finder is actually very strong in detecting signals where in weakly diffracting data sets. And that's basically it. So you can see that when you use this machine learning spot finder and you can attach it to both indexer Xgandalf or Toro, you will just get a bump into the quality metrics that you can extract out of your data set. So with this, I close the part in which I'm speaking about how to use deep learning framework and general machine learning to actually improve the software stack that you use in experiments. And the idea is that you can use this deep learning framework to actually prototype pretty quickly ideas and make them very fast, thanks to the fact that you can port the code into different hardware accelerators. Another very strong point is that you can take your Python code and actually deploy code that you can use in C++ codes and actually using in high performant software scenarios. And another idea is that really combining these technologies that I've been presenting, we can actually start thinking about doing indexing in real time and actually use this information to steer the experiments. Let's say, stop the experiment if there is nothing to index and restart it. And so improve like automation pipelines during experimental sessions. The second part of my talk is about modeling and simulations. So before going into the actual application, I would like to quickly give you an overview of what are the simulations. So simulation is really about moving around electrons and simulating atoms and how they interact. So there are different levels of theories depending on the time scales and space scales. But the idea is that if you really go to the Schrödinger equation, that is all you need to know. But though solving the Schrödinger equation is extremely expensive, and on top of that, you also need to propagate Hamilton's equations, and this is what is called molecular dynamics and ab initio molecular dynamics. So typically, you can really do things accurate when you are on the order of few thousand atom maximum. And then if you start increasing the time scales and space scale, you deal with approximation that makes actually your simulation quite inaccurate. And typically the property prediction is very off and your model is not predicting. So you cannot really use your simulation for property prediction or to interpret the experiments. So what is happening actually in the recent years with the advent of this new wave of deep learning and machine learning is that machine learning methods, deep learning methods are actually used to fit highly accurate potential energy surfaces. So those that you actually get from quantum chemistry methods. But the idea is that you fit machine learning models on a set of labels that you spend, weeks, years in extracting from your quantum chemistry approaches. And then once you have trained your machine learning models, you have a model which is a surrogate of that highly accurate level of physics, and you can use that to run simulations. So to give you an order of magnitude for the cost of these simulations, when you run something like a simulation with wave function methods, so density functional theory, to compute properties like energies and forces for molecules or a bunch of molecules like hundreds of atoms, it takes days or weeks. So while running with the machine learning force fields for hundreds, thousands of atoms, it takes just a few minutes on a very standard computer. So the idea is that you can get the same level of accuracy with quantum chemistry that you get with quantum chemistry code with the machine learning models, but the machine learning models allow you to scale time scale and space scale. So, and if you can make your simulation much larger and much longer, then you can really use statistical mechanics to actually predict quantitatively what's happening in your experiments. So the problem is that training a machine learning potential, a machine learning force field, is extremely expensive because you need to run first the quantum chemistry simulations. And what people have been doing is to create very large data sets and start mixing many elements from the periodic table to build actually these foundation models that are supposed to be like universal force field that works on different applications and can just be taken as a black box and applied to different systems to actually predict properties and explain experiments. So the current status is that these models started to appear. They are working, but they're still kind of inaccurate. So this is a recent paper that just came out and is comparing the accuracy in property prediction across to a data set, which is supposed to be a benchmark that you can use to validate a model across very different systems. And machine learning force fields here are doing well, but they are not still around the values of the chemical accuracies, which is what actually you want to trust your model. So the idea is that you can still not trust any model out there that claim to be a foundation model. So machine learning is not there yet. Is not able yet to substitute Tab-init simulations like the density functional theory. But what we can do is to keep training novel machine learning force fields on specific system by fine-tuning this foundational model. And if you do this, then you can get to the level of accuracy of DFT, and you can actually use it as a predictive tool that give you accurate results. So here is an example in which we used a fine-tuned machine learning force fields to run large simulations on a material that here is an alloy, a Wurzel alumina, which is doped with oxygen. And the idea is that from X-ray diffraction, they see this kind of kink around 8% of oxygen content, and this is typically interpreted as a solubility limit, which usually correspond to the material that is failing, and which is not true. Actually, they don't see this in real life. So there is a mismatch in the way in which the scientists interpret the sea lattice shrinkage from X-ray experiments, and so we use modeling actually to understand what is happening atomistically and to give an explanation to this behavior in the X-ray pattern. And what we do is that we can use random structure search, generate a huge amount of structures on very large supercells to accommodate disorder and heterogeneity in the lattice. And then we can use unsupervised machine learning to compare how similar are all the structures that we generate and project it down into a dimensionality reduction, into a map that allows us to actually understand what's going on in this in the space of the lattices that we generated. And for each lattice that we generate, we can actually minimize and get the energy and the properties of each structure and each conformation. And from there, we can try to understand, to link the properties to the actual behavior that we observe during the experiment. So what we see is that actually there is a segregation of the destruction as a function of the oxygen content. This is captured very well by kernel PCA. And so the idea is that inside the lattice, there is the formation of large voids, and there is a lot of disorder that accommodate that allows the lattice to accommodate for the frustration around oxygen-rich areas, and this is confirmed actually by positron annealing lifetime spectroscopies, which is confirming the fact that actually we have higher lifetime of positron inside these large voids. So what we actually can do is that thanks to
Sorry, can I just, you've got a 2-minute warning.
yeah, actually, I'm actually done.
Contact you otherwise, sorry.
I'm actually done. So thanks to the machine learning force fields, what we can do is that we could actually generate a huge amount of structure, very large lattices. Very large lattices are important because you can accommodate disorder and structural heterogeneity, and we can get many different properties, and they can be accurate. So this is the main point. And okay, so the conclusion is that machine learning is helping simulations, and simulations are very helpful for experiments. The thing is that accurate simulations are typically prohibitive, but nowadays, thanks to machine learning force fields, simulations are becoming affordable, and you can actually afford to simulate realistic systems at an accuracy that is that of ab initio methods. And one other important thing is that we are lacking benchmarks, very good benchmarks. So experiments are also important for validating these novel machine learning force fields that are coming out and actually prove if they're actually predictive or if they fail. So it's also very important to combine this wave of machine learning methods for physics with experiments also to provide novel way to benchmark these methods. Thank you. I'm actually done.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Questions? Oh, up there.
Quick question about the source code of the programs you're talking about and for integration data. Is the source available? Any license or where?
Which code?
The one for integration data in
Yeah.
indexing.
So there are two versions. One is so actually there is a bit of mess with the names. So they are the same algorithm. One it's called Toro, and which is published, and it's Python, and is integrated in Criswell. You can find it. I think I will. Sorry.
I think the question
Here.
was whether you've got a repository.
Yeah, it's
Whether-
here. So
whether you
it's
can
in Rancolab. So this is the actually place, and there is also GitHub with you will find it. So if you go in the paper, you will find in the source part the link. And then there is this other version, which is the CUDA part, which is being actively developed, but the name changed and it's called Fast Feedback Indexer. And yeah, you can use it.
Any more questions? Anything online?
I'm sorry, I really do not understand indexing problem.
Thank you, me neither.
I determine, or my group determined many structures. We had indexing problem only if we have more than 3 crystals in the beam. And also, but we always knew detector experimental parameters. If you do not know position of the beam, yes, you can make from simple experiment the problematic experiment. But I do not see any reason for that. Indexing has been solved 25 years or 30 years ago. And in 90s, Hamburg was so successful, was tremendously successful. I think 70% of all structures were done in Hamburg, just because when you call Zbyszek Dauter at 2 a.m. And wake him up, he knew the position of the beam on any 4 beam lines over there. So I'm sorry for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the comment.
You have a reply, yeah? To that?
No, sorry, I didn't get the actual question. So we don't understand the you don't understand the indexing problem.
It was more of a comment regarding that indexing itself is a solved problem. So why do you now go off and do that with a machine learning algorithm?
So
Yeah, no, I agree. So the idea is that you still do these experiments, right? And you still want to collect data. And you still have scientists that spend nights and months preparing these. And all these experiments are very expensive. So again, I'm not an experimental scientist, but I've been seeing this. And a lot of things can go wrong. So you would like to have a very fast feedback system that is there telling you what's going on in your experiments. You know already a lot about your problem. Maybe you know already the kind of type of lattice. So yeah, maybe you have already solutions, but you still want a software that is there with you, acting on the data and giving you an answer, right? So this is what we are doing, right? So we are trying, how do you know if an image that you are collecting actually contain information about the protein that you are measuring? You actually need to index it, right? And that's it.
So can I explain the problem that Vladek missed in listening to this, which is, this is a bit better than MOSFilm, no better than some other algorithms, but it can do it 3,000 times a second. That's the point.
Maybe I can just also say that this is about zero crystallography, in which is much less controlled than the traditional rotational crystallography. And I think in this, like all these new developments make a major distinction. So that's another comment to Vladek's comment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Piero.